Number 5. The 1957 Chevrolet Nomad Super Turbo Affair. It started as a show car. It ended as a scandal. The Nomad was never supposed to go racing. Chevrolet built it as a dream car concept. A two-door wagon with the kind of lines that belonged on a movie poster, not a drag strip. But when the Super Turbo Fire V8 went under the hood, 283 cubic inches, 283 horsepower, 1 horsepower per cubic inches, something changed. Engineers started doing math they weren't supposed to do. The Nomad was light, unusually light for a wagon, and with that engine breathing through dual 4-barrel carburetors, it ran quarter miles that made pure sports cars look slow. Here's where it gets interesting. Private racers, not the factory, private racers, started campaigning Nomads at drag strips across the Midwest. They were winning. Consistently. Against purpose-built machines. NHRA officials noticed the Nomad didn't fit neatly into their classification system. It was a station wagon on paper. But it performed like something else entirely. They reclassified it mid-season, moved it into a higher, more competitive class where the wins stopped coming as easy. Chevrolet didn't say a word publicly. But internally, they were already working on something far more dangerous. Topper for the 1960 Dodge Pioneer Wagon, the Ram Charger hauler. Dodge built this to carry luggage. Then someone bolted on the Ram Charger engine. Everything went wrong after that. By 1960, Chrysler's engineers were operating on a different frequency from the rest of Detroit. They were building engines with one purpose: to win drag races. The 383 cubic inch Ram Charger V8 was producing somewhere between 325 and 340 horsepower in street trim. In race trim, with headers and a radical cam, the number got uncomfortable. Someone, the story changes depending on who you ask, decided to drop that engine into a Dodge Pioneer station wagon as an experiment. The Pioneer had a longer wheelbase than a sedan, more stability under hard acceleration. The weight distribution was actually favorable for straight-line speed. It ran fast enough that Dodge's own drag racing division, the famed Ram Charger Club, started paying attention. Test runs at Detroit Dragway produced times that made the timing slips look like printing errors. NHRA rules at the time were still catching up to what manufacturers were actually capable of. The Pioneer existed in a gray zone, technically a production vehicle, technically a wagon, technically legal. That gray zone closed fast. Officials mandated that any wagon competing in stock eliminator classes had to run against its actual production weight, which for a Pioneer was substantial. The performance advantage evaporated overnight. But that's not even the craziest part. Several of those Pioneers were allegedly campaigned in unsanctioned meets throughout 1960 and 1961, running against top fuel machines and grudge-style events. Eyewitness accounts say they held their own. No official record, no documentation, just stories that won't die. Number 3. The 1963 Studebaker Lark Dame Tona Wagono Rigger. A bankrupt company had no right building something this fast. They did it anyway. By 1963, Studebaker was financially bleeding out. The company was months from collapse. The accountants were panicking. The executives were desperate. The engineers? They were building a supercharged station wagon. The Lark Wagonaire was Studebaker's innovative sliding roof wagon, genuinely unique in the American market, but the Daytona trim changed the conversation entirely. Underneath sat the R2 supercharged version of the 289 cubic inch Avanti engine. Supercharged. In a wagon. Horsepower was officially listed at 290. Unofficially, and Studebaker's own internal documents suggest this. Properly prepared R2 engines were producing north of 330. The Wagonaire was entered in 60A events in multiple regions by private competitors. It was fast enough through corners that pure sports cars were struggling to gap it on short tracks. SCCA officials reviewed the entry. The ruling came back. The Wagonaire could not compete against GT-class vehicles, despite its performance because it was classified as a utility vehicle. It was simultaneously too fast for stock classes and structurally ineligible for GT classes. Studebaker was essentially banned by definition. Their wagon existed in a category that didn't exist. The company folded the following year. The Wagonaire was never given a fair fight, and some enthusiasts still argue it would have won one. 2. The 1969 F41 Country Tresquire. The Cobra Jet grocery jetter. Ford put the same engine from the Torino Cobra into a wood-paneled family wagon. The rulebook didn't account for this. This is where Detroit crossed a line. The 1969 Ford Country Squire was America's quintessential family wagon. Wood paneling. 3-row seating. The kind of car you associated with family road trips and golden retrievers. Ford also offered it with the 428 Cobra Jet engine. 400 cubic inches. Officially rated at 335 horsepower, a number Ford deliberately suppressed to keep insurance companies from losing their minds. Real-world dyno tests put the actual output closer to 410. The Country Squire with the Cobra jet weighed around 4,500 pounds, but that engine was engineered to pull, and pull it did. Private racers figured this out fast. The Country Squire became a sleeper weapon at drag strips. Run a minivan-looking thing with wood paneling against a muscle car, and the muscle car driver doesn't take it seriously. Until it's too late. NHRA stock class officials examined the situation carefully. A 428 Cobra jet in any vehicle, sedan, coupe, or wagon, triggered scrutiny. But the wagon presented a specific classification problem. Its weight put it at a disadvantage on paper that didn't match what was happening on the track. Organizers at multiple regional events began informally turning away Country Squire entries with performance engines. Not a formal ban. Something quieter and more effective. Just don't let it line up. Ford discontinued the 428 Cobra jet option for the Country Squire after 1969. Officially, the reason was market demand. Nobody really believed that. Number 2 Seston, 1970 AMC Royal Machine Wagon. The one they never admitted existed. This wasn't just banned. It was erased. AMC in 1970 was the underdog of underdogs. Smaller than Ford, Chrysler, or GM. Less money, less engineering staff, less everything. But sometimes desperation produces genius. The Rebel machine was AMC's full-throttle muscle car answer. 390 cubic inch V8, 340 horsepower, factory confirmed. It came in sedan form and announced itself loudly with patriotic red, white, and blue graphics. What the public didn't know, what AMC didn't advertise, was that a small number of Rebel machine wagons were built as factory experimental vehicles. The same 390 engine. The same performance suspension package. In a wagon body. These weren't dealer vehicles. They were factory test units, evaluated by AMC's engineering team for a potential performance wagon line that never reached production. Several of these experimental units were released to private racers through informal channels, a practice that was not unusual in the muscle car era. They began appearing at NHRA divisional events in 1970. The reaction was immediate. NHRA officials rejected the entries, not because the cars were too fast, though they were, but because AMC could not produce documentation confirming these were legitimate production vehicles. They existed in an impossible space, factory-built but officially non-existent. AMC couldn't acknowledge them without admitting they'd been running unapproved experimental machinery in sanctioned competition. The wagons disappeared. No official records. A handful of photographs. Testimonies from racers who competed against them and refused to believe what they'd seen. To this day, AMC's factory records on those bills remain either destroyed or undisclosed. The fastest American wagon ever built never officially existed. Detroit built these machines in an era when the rules couldn't keep up with the engineers. They had horsepower in wood-paneled station wagons. They slipped supercharged engines into family haulers. They exploited every gray area in the rulebook until the rulebook was rewritten specifically to stop them. And when they couldn't be stopped by rules, they were erased by silence. These weren't just fast cars. They were proof that American engineers, when given a blank check and no guardrails, will put a race engine in anything. Even your family wagon. Especially your family wagon.